Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Xiao has been one of the most anticipated rerun characters ever since his release nearly a year ago. But how strong is a peak potential free-to-play 2021 Pogo Palooza champion in 2022? In today's video, we'll be taking a look at what a peak potential free-to-play Xiao is able to accomplish. Up to this point, this peak potential free-to-play series has been rather successful, all thanks to you guys destroying that like button and leaving awesome and constructive comments. And as such, this is now the fourth installment in my peak potential free-to-play series. Fortunately, my Xiao has been at Constellation 0 ever since his release, and thus this makes him much more free-to-play relatable than the rest of my roster. And if you've been watching other content creators' Xiaos, you've been seeing a lot of recent showcases of triple crowned Xiaos with constellations with really good artifacts and either the Staff of Homa or Primordial Jade Winged Spear, none of which is necessarily all that accurate for most free-to-play players. A lot of showcases for Xiaos will also jump cut through his downtime windows and don't focus on the total duration of his Abyss 12 clears. So here I am to, I guess ironically, provide a bit more of an accurate representation for a very well invested free-to-play Constellation 0 Xiao. Anyway, let's quickly define what peak potential means here. Peak potential free-to-play is not for those faint of heart. It usually takes 2 to 3 months of dedicated farming for a free-to-play player to reach a reasonable power level for their character of choice. Peak potential free-to-play will only consider things that are free-to-play accessible. For weapons, this includes in-game guaranteed weapons like the craftable weapons and the event weapons, and this completely excludes 5-star weapons. I will sometimes use common 4-star gacha weapons like the Favonius weapons and stuff like that. I also normalize my supports to be that of around free-to-play levels. And by now, all of our accounts and experiences are so drastically different that it's impossible to say what a free-to-play player might have or might not have. Some of you have a Constellation 5 Bennett with the Aquila Favonia, while others still don't even have a Bennett. So all I can do is to do my best to adjust my characters to a reasonable free-to-plays level. The goal of this video is to showcase how powerful, or I guess how weak, if that's how you want to view it, a peak potential Xiao is. With all that out of the way, we can finally take a look at my Xiao's build. Here are my Xiao's stats. While his artifacts are likely quite a bit better than most peak potential free-to-play Xiaos, his talents are at 9, 9, and 9. His talents being at 9, 9, and 9 loses him about 9.45% damage in comparison to double crowning his plunge and his burst. So I think this is a fair compromise. My Xiao is using a Refinement 5 Blackcliff Polearm. But wait, before continuing, I highly don't recommend getting refinements on this polearm, and instead I recommend just leaving this polearm at Refinement 1 and saving that star glitter for additional pulls. Of course, my Xiao is at Constellation 0 throughout this entire video, and after factoring in everything about my Xiao's build, he is at 75% damage potential in comparison to another Blackcliff wielding triple crowned Xiao. This is the highest damage potential I've actually showcased in any of my peak potential free-to-play videos. And I actually think this is fair because Xiao has been out for a while and his artifacts, right now because he doesn't have a dedicated 4-piece set, are easier to farm. Next, let's talk about his supports. As usual with the power of math, I do my best to normalize my supports to reasonable free-to-play level. My Bennett is using a level 60 out of 70 Alley Flash, which puts his attack buff really close to a level 80 out of 90 Constellation 1 Bennett with the prototype Rancor. As mentioned earlier, I do use Zhongli a lot in this video, as he is highly recommended for casual Xiao play. And honestly, I highly recommend pulling for Zhongli if you have Xiao, because Zhongli will help you tremendously. Anyway, my Zhongli has the tenacity of the Millilith and a level 1 Favonius Lance. Next we have Sucrose, who is here to battery Xiao as well as to provide him with the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers buff. For a few additional clips later in the video, I will use Lisa, Fischl, and Traveler, but for the most part, I don't use them all that much. So now with all that out of the way, we can finally start with the first volunteer, the Regis Vines. The first showcase here is just spamming high plunges. We can see that his high plunge attacks with no buffs or resonances is doing 25 to 26,000 damage per high plunge. Now let's take a look at a quick clip of his jet combo. First of all, Xiao's first 2 E's are doing 18,000 to 20,000 damage. Then I use his jet combo, which provides a bit more single target DPS in this situation. This is a very reasonable performance for our Pogo Palooza champion. And now that we've gotten a pretty good look at his solo damage output, let's take a look at his team damage. With Zhongli's shield, Bennett's burst, and the Thrilling Tales buff from Sucrose, Xiao is able to do quite a bit of damage to the Primordial Jade Winged Spear. In fact, he's almost able to one-cycle it during his entire burst duration. All things considered, this is a great performance for our favorite emo boy. And we can't talk about Xiao without talking about his AoE damage. Here are a couple relevant environments for Xiao, with the first one being the Viridescent Veneer dungeon. Sucrose is able to pull all the mobs in for Xiao's plunge attacks to quickly dispose of everyone. As we can see, unlike Crimson Witch users, Xiao is able to farm the artifacts that he'd also like to use. There's another very relevant dungeon for Xiao, and that is the Shimenao's Reminiscence and the Emblem of Severed Fates. By using Xiao's jumps to mess with the Lava Troll's AI so it throws something at you instead of dashing across the map, Xiao is able to keep it in place long enough to easily kill it with his burst. As we can see, Xiao's AoE performance is very respectable, and he's able to farm both of these domains for himself very efficiently. But of course, it's always critical to see how a character performs in the current hardest content in the game, Abyss 12. I do refill my energy for each chamber, so yeah. Admittingly, the current Abyss 12 is not great for Xiao, but it's also frankly not great for a lot of characters. But I think it's particularly valuable to see how a character performs against monsters that they struggle against. Now before continuing, I need to point out that the refinements on the Blackcliff actually helped a lot here. Since I'm able to kill the first 3 puppies with Xiao, I'm able to get those 3 Blackcliff stacks. Please keep this in mind as my Xiao is actually overperforming. Anyway, Xiao's constant pushback is very unfortunate in this environment. This problem is compounded by the fact that neither Bennett's nor Sucrose's buffs last throughout the full duration of his burst. As we can see, his damage falls off a cliff once those buffs run out. Anyway, with a 5-star support, aka Zhongli, and with a Refinement 5 Blackcliff, Xiao is able to complete this in 58 seconds. You can expect quite a bit of time added without the refinements on Blackcliff as well as without Zhongli. Anyway, 1221 is Xiao's best friend, as these Geovishaps don't have elevated resistances to anemo damage, and they can also kind of be grouped together, and they have relatively low HP pools. Finally, by abusing Zhongli's petrification to extend their unflinching duration, Xiao can attack with impunity for quite a while, and crush both the Geovishaps in a very respectable 23 seconds. And unfortunately, 1231 is not a good chamber for Xiao. Not only is the first crab robot quite durable, but after the crab robot there are 2 even more durable Electro Doggos. Unlike the other showcases, which usually jump cut through the entire fight to just show big plunge numbers with all his buffs up, I think it's important to leave the full run here so you get a perspective of that. Fortunately, Xiao is able to take out the first 2 robots with a single burst. But notably, it takes Xiao about 30 seconds for each of his rotations. This is because of his requirement to funnel a bunch of energy to him after his burst ends. Unfortunately for the second rotation, Xiao's E positions him in a way that pushes the wolves away from each other. But I use this opportunity to heavily damage one of the wolves because the other wolf was doing who the heck knows what on the other side of the map. Then it's the usual funneling a bunch of energy to the characters that need it, in this case mostly Bennett and Xiao, and by the stars aligning, Zhongli managed to petrify both the wolves near the wall and with his pillar behind them. This allows Xiao to not be as heavily punished by his heavy knockback against the wolves, and he was able to finally clean up this floor in 1 minute and 31 seconds. In the background, I'll have a different team comp playing while I talk more about Xiao's performance. I will also show a variation of Xiao's team without any 5-star supports because Zhongli actually helps tremendously against these wolves. As not only is his petrification invaluable, he also provides a constant 20% animal resistance shred, which ends up being around 26.7% more damage against these giant wolves. Sadly, due to miHoYo further increasing the difficulty of Abyss 12, even peak potential free-to-play DPS characters like Xiao are not as easily able to annihilate the current Abyss 12 and easily score those 9 stars. Despite that, I still think that Xiao's performance here was still respectable. However, it's worth noting that Xiao heavily relied on Zhongli and Bennett throughout. Without Zhongli and other 5-star characters to consider, it's really questionable as to who is a great 4th teammate for Xiao. This run in the background with only 4-star teammates really highlights this, as this peak potential free-to-play Xiao cuts it close for completing 12-1-1 in the recommended 90 seconds without Zhongli. And mind you, this is with a peak F2P potential Fischl replacing Zhongli as well. And we all know that 12-3-1 is much harder than 12-1-1, so this team's performance there would be even worse. For truly dedicated Xiao mains that want to build their entire accounts around Xiao, pulling for 5-star polearms like the Primordial Jade Winged Spear, the Staff of Homa, or even the Calamity Queller is something seriously worth considering. Overall, it's unquestionable that Xiao is still a great character even an entire year later. However, whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, the new Abyss 12s seem to be getting much more difficult. When Xiao was released, Xiao was still beating up on Hilichurls in Abyss 12. Now, well, we have giant, staggerable 1 million hit point enemies like the Rift Hounds, which are one of his worst enemies. Regardless, this increase in difficulty affects the entire cast and not just Xiao, and to still see him perform this well an entire year later is a testament to his power. Let me know what you think about Xiao in today's meta and what you think about a peak potential free-to-play Xiao's performance. Also, I regularly make Genshin Impact videos ranging from Caesar showcases, DPS showdowns, guide videos, and more. So be sure to smash the subscribe button as it's the best and easiest way for you to support my work. Also, don't forget to like the video and leave a comment for the YouTube algorithm. As usual, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Win to Lose, signing out.